So we're going to have a quick think about the software we're going to use for the ClutterBase project. And because we're going to be integrating with the DCC tools, it makes sense to follow something called the VFX reference platform. And the VFX reference platform is a set of common targets and tools that are used by most of the DCC providers to build upon. So this specifies certain standards for programming languages, certain versions of the programming languages, as you can see here, certain library that everyone is going to use. So to start with, we're going to stick with 2022, mainly because of the version of Maya and Houdini that we're using. They're all based around these versions rather than the current 2023 versions. So the core things we're going to use are going to be Python 3.9 latest, which, to be honest, is not that bad and not much difference from 3.10. So the transition, if we do then move to the latest version of the VFX reference platform, is not going to be that vast. So that's quite nice. You'll also see that the Qt version at present is 5.15. And that's pretty stable, and it has been pretty stable across the last few years. So again, we're going to use PySide or Qt for Python 5.15. On a side note to this, because I'm doing some development on a Mac, Qt 5.15 at present doesn't work very well on the Mac M1. So I'm going to have to develop in PySide 6 on my Mac and then port to a different version. I may build from scratch later a lower version of this, but I have to basically build it from source, so it's a bit of a pain. And last year when I developed a tool, it made very little difference moving between different versions because we're using a sort of small subset, so it shouldn't matter too much. Of the other tools here, none of them we're particularly going to use as part of any of this, so that's pretty easy. Now, the other thing that I've done is I've just created a GitHub repository. So I'm going to use this now as I carry on through to start working on the project. So I created this directly on GitHub, created a very simple README, which I'll begin to flesh out, and a link to the vlog. I created a python.gitignore project here. So this is just the boilerplate Python gitignore, which is very useful for ensuring that quite a lot of the clutter that you get with Python projects get rid of. And I've just created a new general license because just open source all the software because it's all public facing anyway. So that's all been created. Now I'm going to use a tool called PyEnv for installing and setting up my Python environment, because I find that PyEnv makes installing packages, getting the correct versions of Python a lot easier. So I will put a link in here, but one of the first things I'm going to do is to set up PyEnv using the project here, and then I will set up within my project folder here that version of PyEnv, so everyone has got the version of PyEnv to use for the project. There are other ways of doing this. As I say, I found PyEnv to be the easiest of all ways of doing this. When you're working across multiple projects with multiple different versions of Python, you basically just set up the folder you're working in to have the version of Python that you need to work, and everything just seems to work quite well. So we will install this as part of the lab. I've already got it installed on my machine. I will put links to this setup document in the rest of the vlog as well. So the next part of this project, we're going to move on and start just getting everything installed and set up ready for us to get working on actually developing some code.